Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening space. My name is Sakwa. I will be one of your co hosts today, and I am doing this together with Wanjiru Ngohi of Baraza Lab, particularly the Fumbua project. And today we are discussing fake news, misinformation, and disinformation. We also have our friends from ELOG, represented by Agesa, who are partnering with us on this. We will have this in two or three parts. First of all, they are both ELOG, ourselves, Emerging Leaders Foundation Africa, and Baraza Media Lab through the Fumbua project. Between last year and today, ran several surveys and released different reports on the same subject of fake news, misinformation, and disinformation. So we'll start by just getting insights from these three tools, these three reports. What do they say? Where are the points of convergence? And then we will get into the real discussion, just to get into a couple of questions. What does fake news look like? What is the distinction between misinformation and disinformation? How do we spot the two? What are the stopgap measures? How do we protect ourselves from being victims of misinformation, disinformation? Who benefits from this vice? And what can we do to stop this? How can we be the agents of different narrative that tackles or addresses fake news, misinformation, disinformation? So we will take just 1 minute to allow one or two more people to step in. If you have a question, you have a contribution, get it ready. We will have an opportunity in the second part where all of us will respond to those questions. All of us will have an opportunity to make our comments or to ask a question, and this will run towards the end of the session this evening. We intend to run this from the next 1 minute all the way to 7:30 p.m. or thereabout. So in the next 1 minute, we'll be able to start officially. I see my co-host Wanjiru Nguhi is here. I see friends from Ilog Agesa is also here. We have a host of people from different organizations and formations. We will get to know them as they introduce themselves and make contribution to today's conversation. So now that you know the topic and the form and shape that it's going to take, also have yourself on standby. A question could just come your way, and we'll be happy to hear your thoughts. I also see my friend Kalenda from Vijana Co in Uganda. Karibu sana. So in 1 minute, we will do the official kickoff. Okay, and we are ready to go. Um, in Kenya's political landscape, just as it would be in any other African country that you might choose to pick, information pollution in public debate has had and continues to bear heavily on political processes, including the general elections and every other aspect that comes in between. While fact checking has traditionally been the role of journalists, misinformation and disinformation has permeated all media platforms, taking the form of fabricated news articles, manipulated visuals, misleading narratives, and deceptive political rhetoric. And This has posed a danger that many times has even led to threatening situations on lives of different people in Kenya and beyond. This evening, we gather to dissect this subject: fake news, misinformation, and disinformation. What is it? Where does it stem from? How do we identify? How do we protect ourselves? How do we counter? What are the stopgap measures? How do we reverse the effects of fake news, misinformation, and disinformation? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the space. I want to start by inviting my co-host Wanjiru Nguhi to just make a few comments in opening, and then we will give the microphone. Loch will give the microphone to our friend Roba, who will make a few, pick up a couple of insights from the verify.ke, the misinformation disinformation toolkit by ELF Africa. Then we will take it back to Wanjiru and the team at Fumbua and Baraza Lab to also make a couple of give us a few insights from their own toolkit, and we will hear from Ilog, who interestingly have a document that speaks to this subject around the protests, the movement that we have had over the last 6-7 weeks. So, Anjiru, for your introduction and opening thoughts, welcome.
All right. Thank you very much. And thank you so much for curating and organizing this space. My name is Wanjiru Nguhe. I work at Baraza Media Lab, and I head the Fumbua program, which is a program that deals, exclusively with mis and disinformation, particularly in public interest, cases and situations. And I'm happy to be here. I'm looking forward to learning and also sharing some of the insights that we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wanjiru, for that opening. I do not know if Robert already has the microphone. If Robert has the microphone, we can get to him to open for us with those insights. If he still doesn't have, we can give the microphone to Agesa. Agesa, you can just unmute also and make your opening as we wait for Robert to get the microphone and start off with the insights from verify.ke.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. My name is Paulina Gesa from the Elections Observation Group ELOG, and I'm looking forward to us having a very insightful discussion and very concrete points and way forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sakwa, and a good evening to each and every one of you. My name is Robert Mwangi, a team player at Emerging Leaders Foundation Africa. I'm the Program Officer, Governance and Civic Engagement. So just quickly, sometime last year, we worked with Mzalendo. I've seen Mwamburi from Mzalendo. We worked with Mzalendo and two students from the United States, and we were looking at issues to do with mis and disinformation, and the partnership between the three organizations. We were able to put together a toolkit on mis and disinformation. So we were able to engage different players, different stakeholders on these, and more so our main focus was on young people. So for us, we were looking mainly at number one, the election period that was in 2022, as well as post the election period, and looking at what were some of the causes, and what were some of the key movers in terms of mis and disinformation, as well as where was mis and disinformation mainly spread within this period. So I'm just going to take very few minutes to just share some quick highlights of some of the findings from the research that we conducted, which then informed the toolkit that we developed. So one of the findings was that politics is on the minds of young people in Kenya. And from the persons that we were able to engage in the research, 72.9% of youths who were engaged in the survey indicated that they talk to their peers about elections and politics on a daily basis. And I know this also reflects most of our opinion in this regard, because I'm sure if you're being carried by your Uber guy or your Boda person, or even with the Mama Mboga where you go to buy groceries, if you just pause there and just tell them, we hii serikali, and just leave it at that, the conversation basically starts flowing from that point. But then, interesting was the fact that out of these 72% of young people, we found out that only about 45% of the persons that we interviewed had accurate information, and that means even the conversations that we get to have, not only during the political or the election year, but even on issues of governance and all that, it then means that if we only have an understanding of 45%, then that basically is what is going to inform the conversation that we get to have with our peers. Number two, another finding was that, so on the second thing, we were looking at what were the different types of mis and disinformation. And for this one, the main ones that were highlighted, and I think this was also because we engaged them from the point of election period. So most of the issues that came up were issues to do with hate speech, directed at specific ethnic groups. And the other one was false information about candidates' past or their beliefs. This is where you also get to find people coming up and saying, this has been a deadbeat dad, this has been a deadbeat mom, this and this happened, we engaged in this and this manner, and so on. And the last one was also issues to do with true statements, untrue statements of facts about that specific candidate. The third finding was that despite being on average a well-educated group, that is given the group that we were able to engage in the survey, most of them, that was about 88% that we surveyed, had never received any training on how to identify mis and disinformation or any media literacy training. So this also shows that it is really important for us to have this conversation on mis and disinformation, and especially among young people who are most of the time engaging in different social media platforms. And then the last one that I'm going to share for now is when asked about the different sources that are most used in terms of spreading mis and disinformation, what we found out is that from the respondents, we were able to engage quite a number of respondents. 60 of them identified social media platforms being the most culpable in terms of spreading issues to do with mis and disinformation. And another about 30%, 40% of the respondents also identified media organizations as being responsible. And I think we've also seen these from some of the untrue statements that are shared at times on mainstream media, but also on other channels as well. So for now, I'm just going to share that the toolkit is available on our website, and it goes further to highlight how can we get to identify mis and disinformation, how can we curb this, and all that. So that toolkit is available on our website. Thank you very much, and back to you, Sako.
Thank you very much, Robert, for that opening. I believe that we have taken note, or we were taking notes of the key figures as Robert was sharing. One of the questions I will be starting with after we hear a few more insights from Fumbua and Ilog is what is your definition? You who is listening, what is your definition of fake news, misinformation, and disinformation? You can just begin to type your definition in the comment section, and then once we get to that question, we will compare and contrast and see who is where as far as defining these key terms is concerned. Wanjiru, let me give it to you from your survey and your report that you have. What are the 2 or 3 insights or data sets that come out strikingly that you would like to share with us as part of this conversation?
All right, thank you very much. I think we've done a bit of sort of social listening with some of our partners. But the thing that I would like to really insist on, especially with this space, is the fact that sometimes when you're looking at mis and disinformation, the audience has really changed. And we've noticed that within the protests, especially during after 25th June, there has been a lot of improvement to the public and how the public is consuming information. And I think I'd attribute this to the fact that there's a lot of distrust between the public and the government. And so therefore, anything the government says, there's always someone in the comments or someone just publicly, coming out to refute what the government is saying. So there's been a lot of improvement, a lot of organic improvement where people are beginning to understand what propaganda is, when people are beginning to understand mis and disinformation, even if they might not understand what the term means. People really are beginning to see that the kind of narratives that the government is peddling and the kind of narratives that the government is using to sort of either manipulate the audiences or do some kind of propaganda. And we've seen a lot of developments, in the past couple of weeks. The thing that we really were paying attention to was the public fact checks that people were doing, because the problem that we are facing, especially with this Kenya Kwanza administration, is the fact that it has been a government that has been very dishonest. And it's the kind of dishonesty that cannot exactly be fact checked, because you cannot fact check promises, you cannot fact check intentions, you cannot fact check, it's almost like fact checking a preacher. And I really do feel like this government has been speaking like evangelists, and no offense to any Christian, who might be listening to this space, but they have really perfected the art of saying things that cannot be fact checked. So it has become, they are using what is called information manipulation, where there are some truths and some lies, which cannot really be fact-checked. And that is a lot of what we've been seeing. And the public has caught up to this and has been doing a lot of debunks on their own organically, even without the fact-checkers. So which is something, that I've seen on Twitter, and also something that we've seen mostly even on TikTok, where people are breaking down information by the government very, very accurately. And people have also been able to tell, when campaigns by pro-government accounts have been even, have been sponsored, and people have been able to call them out and even to say, listen, this is what is going on and this is what we know. So there's definitely been organic growth, in how information is consumed and whether or not people understand propaganda, information manipulation, disinformation, even misinformation. And there have been very many trends. One of the most interesting ones that I've seen and that we observed was the aura for aura, where when a government account posts propaganda content, then there was propaganda from the from the public. So when government says something, then there was a trend where people were responding with propaganda that was obviously a lie, but it was I thought it was very creative, but then it was also a bit dangerous, because when this information crosses over to other platforms, then it becomes a little bit difficult for people to understand the context of the aura for aura conversation, which was basically within the X spaces. So I think what we've observed is how alert people are, and I think it's because of the democracy conversations that have been going on, things that have happened organically, and it is really encouraging, because then it means that we have like the perfect audience to sort of do the training, mis and disinformation training, and also do a lot of political and civic education. Everything that has been worked on in the past 30 years, I think this is the time to fully get into work that actually has the benefits that we could probably not get within 10, 15, 30 years ago, which is a fantastic thing that we are observing, even as we track mis and disinformation and what and the response to mis and disinformation from the public.
All right, thank you very much, Wanjiru. And you've gotten into one of the questions that I have here, the observations you've been making, but we'll get back to it to just hear a lot more on a few more definition of mis and disinformation. I can't see anyone yet. So you can get to the comment section of this space and just tell us what is your definition of misinformation, or rather, how do you distinguish between misinformation and disinformation? That would be an interesting point to start your comments from. But I want come
Okay.
to. Sorry, Wanjiru, you're saying something?
No, I thought you were asking a question. So let me just wait for you
No.
to finish.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was for everyone on the space, everyone who's listening in, to just type their own definition of misinformation and disinformation in the chat. Listeners, if you could just go to the chat and tell us, what do you um, think disinformation is? What do you think misinformation is? But I want to go to Agesa. You at ELOG have released two reports in the recent past, within the context of the Gen Z movement. Would you what in a very high level? How would you capture the spirit and the letter of those two reports that you have released?
Thank you so much. And first, I'll just give a context to the two reports.
Agesa, if you're speaking, you have muted again.
Can you hear me now? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Proceed.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just build up to what Wanjiru has said. Our first report was just a trend analysis that we did in 2023. This was over a period of 1 year. We noticed that when political activities heighten in the country, that is the period we are most likely to encounter the largest number of disinformation cases. But then there's a caveat to that, whereby when people have information about what is going on, and these issues are discussed on, let's say, radio, TV, in barazas, then there's a reduction in disinformation. But when these issues are not discussed keenly and deeply, that is when we see a spike in disinformation incidences in the country. And interestingly, you will not see this in relation to other economic or other spheres of the life. In Kenya, disinformation and hate speech is highly attributed or related to political activities. So that is just a
Can we hear Agesa? Or is it just me who has lost her?
No, we've lost her.
Okay. Agesa? Okay.
apologies. Am I audible?
Yes.
Apologies for that. I don't know where people could not hear me from, but I'll just start with the June 2024 report.
Robert, I had challenges hearing. I guess I don't know whether she's still speaking.
Yes, she's
Yes,
still
she's
speaking.
back now.
All right, then. In our June 2024 report, we recorded and were able to verify 39 instances of disinformation. And this, not surprisingly, 46% were from X. So all these incidences, a majority came from X, followed by Facebook, and then TikTok, and then the other social media platforms. And unlike the other reports that we've had before, there was a presence or involvement of young people, commonly the Gen Zs, and this type of disinformation did not majorly come from a point of not knowing, but as a countermeasure to what the government
Sakwa, are you there? I think we lost Agesa again.
Yes, I am Robert. For some reason, I have not heard a single thing from Agesa, but it's great if you guys got part of what she said. I want to go back to Wanjiro as I hand over to you to take lead over the next couple of minutes. I on definitions. I'm still not seeing any of people or the guys here in the chat define mis and disinformation. So I'll just bring it to you directly because there is no one I have heard define these terms better than you. So what is fake news? What is misinformation? What is disinformation? Wanjiro.
All right, thank you, Sakwa. So first of all, fake news. Fake news is something that every time I hear the word fake news, it reminds me of Donald Trump. And I don't. There's no. In my, at least in my experience, there's no such thing as fake news because news either is or is not. So I mean, if it's happening, then it is news. There's really no, like, fake news is a very loosely used term. But misinformation is a spread of false information that is not deliberately spread. So it's almost like, for example, if you are on WhatsApp, for example, and you see an opportunity, a job opportunity, and then you forward that job opportunity to someone you know who might need a job without knowing that this job opportunity does not exist, then what you have done is you've become an agent of misinformation because it was not deliberate, like you did not have the intent, to mislead someone. And then we have disinformation, which is the deliberate spreading of false information or misleading information. And sometimes the agents of disinformation are the ones who create this kind of disinformation. Like, for example, what we see with the example I just gave with job interview. So someone who will sit down, and sort of create a job opportunity that does not exist. That person is an agent of disinformation. And if you spread this, knowing very well that this is false and that most people could be scammed or could lose money or could even lose their lives, then you become an agent, of disinformation. Another thing that we're seeing, and I think I touched on it a little bit, is information manipulation, where you have like for example, what has been going on during the protests, for example, and then you have a sponsored inorganic conversation that has a little bit to do with what is going on, but the purpose of this is to distract the people from what they're actually discussing. So instead of discussing the cost of living, you hear people saying the government is listening, and yet we know very well that even if that, like, it's information that is meant to hijack an organic conversation and sort of manipulate the facts or take you away, from what is going on. Another thing about information manipulation is information that has half truths and half facts. So you cannot exactly fact check this information, but the goal is usually to distract you or to manipulate you or to keep you distracted from what is really going on and to really waste your time. So you are angry about the half facts, but you're not really focusing on the democratic conversation that is going on, for example. And I think that is something that we have been really bombarded with, especially during this protest. Even I think from the beginning, of this administration, they've had a lot of information manipulation tactics and information manipulation campaigns, which we have seen, and many people have been able to call these things out and to be able to say, listen, you will not overwhelm us with this kind of communication. I think I've answered. I may have missed something. Please remind me. But that is basically, the information disorders that we've seen, on this app. And I think also information manipulation is also a part of propaganda, where you're either posting, totally false things, or where you're posting a fact and then you're surrounding that fact with a falsified thing. Like, for example, the fertilizer scandal, for example. It was true that bad fertilizer was being sold, but also how it was twisted, it ended up being more of a PR crisis, but not really the food crisis that it really was. And so this is a very dangerous thing to keep the public from accountability, from holding civic and political discussions, and also from keeping the government accountable and transparent. So it's mostly used by either companies or people who just do not want to be held accountable to actions that they're supposed to be doing or actions that they're actually charged with.
All right, thank you, Anjiru. You have mentioned something that leads me to the next question, and I want to put this to Agesa and Kipkalia. You can feel free to also come in. Um, from the insights that you have, Agesa, and what Wanjiru has just shared, how have we seen, or how has misinformation and disinformation affected the movement? How have you seen this affect the people's agenda? Whether it's over the last few weeks or even in events that happened in within our history, how does misinformation and disinformation affect the people's agenda? I guess if you can hear me, um, or
Sorry, Sakwa. Could you ask the question again?
yes, in view of the observations you have made and the insights that Wanjiro has shared, how have we seen misinformation, disinformation affecting the people's agenda? Taking the Gen Z movement as a case study, how does this affect the people's agenda?
To answer that, I think it has two. Its effects are in twofold. First, once the disinformation is spread, then there is a likelihood of the government discrediting the movement or the actions that the citizen are actually trying to achieve. So in that, it has a negative connotation whereby the government will use the disinformation to discredit the whole citizen agenda. On the other side, to the elites, let's say to the elites who are initially not supporting the movement, once they realize this is disinformation, then they get the drive to actually go and find out the true or the intended information, which in another way helps to drive the citizen agenda. But the most harmful one is to the common mwananchi who are in the villages, who will first get to consume the disinformation, and then you find disinformation travels way faster than the right information. So you find negatively, it will affect the citizen agenda, whereby a majority of the people will consume disinformation, and then it's way harder to convince.
I think we lost Agesa, or is it me who can't hear her? Robert, Sakwa?
Yes, we have lost her. Kip, maybe you can weigh in as we wait for Egesa to come back. Kip, we can't hear you.
Okay, seems like we Kip is also unable to. Yeah, because I can't hear him either. I see he's still muted. But we have Mwamburi. If he could take the, and if anyone would like to contribute to any of these questions, just feel free to place the request. You will be given the mic at any point in the conversation. Just place the request for the mic. It will come to you. Then you'll be able to contribute to any of these questions. Lodge, I don't know if we're able to take the mic to Mwamburi. to just Mwamburi. Karen was here. As Karen left, yeah. Mwamburi, or as we wait for Kip to see whether we can hear him.
I have shared I've passed the mic to Mwamburi. I hope he accepts.
Okay. As we wait for that, allow me to go to else, and yeah, I see Mwamburi has the mic now. Mwamburi, I don't know if you're ready.
Yes, I am. Am I audible?
Yes, please proceed.
Yes. Maybe more specifically, what you'd want me to talk about?
If you could weigh in on that question on the effect of misinformation and disinformation on the people's agenda, but also how does it affect? And I know Anjiru alluded to this. How does misinformation, disinformation affect social accountability?
Okay. Thank you. So one, we know that public participation, which is basically the of access to information, which is, crudely put, government agencies or even public officers, is information that cannot be relied upon, then citizens are not able to participate fully in their democratic governance. So then I'm not able to hold my leaders accountable, because then the information that I have is not reliable. I'm not able to follow up on different government policies and government projects, and this affects governance in a whole spectrum. And what this leads to is mistrust between the citizens and government, because then if citizens of the country cannot rely on information coming from government agencies, then whether that information is true or not, there will always be mistrust on that information. There will always be televisions or newspapers. So then if this information that young people are accessing is not true, then we have a large population of the country, 75% of the electorate of the country, more so in Kenya, sharing information or propagating information that is not necessarily true. And if I'm to quickly give an example, during the agitation for reform on the proposals put forth by the Finance Bill 2024, I had seen a screenshot going around alluding that Section 20 of the bill, as was then, had proposed that if you're still living in your parents' house but not paying taxes, then you will be required to pay 300 or 400 shillings to the government, which of course was not true. Clause 20 of that bill was speaking totally to different things, to tariffs and whatnot. So then what happens is that slows down any push for social reform, because then that is misinformation. Then when people share the right information, the public would be wary of such information, because then we had earlier shared, I think, false information. So I think that would be the general effect of misinformation and disinformation, especially when agitating for reform. Back to you, Sakwa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mwamburi. Quite insightful thoughts right there. I want to go back to Kipkalia on with this all these things we are saying and where Mwamburi has left it off. What then is the role of civic education in addressing, mitigating, combating disinformation? Kip.
All right, thank you very much, Sakwa. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you very much, and good evening, good afternoon, good morning to all of you. Thank you very much for joining us wherever you are. Sakwa, you've asked a very important question about the role of civic education. Civic education is very key in this process because, number one, as mentioned by Mwamburi and spoken to a little bit by Agesa, it's very important because there's need for awareness in understanding what misinformation is, what disinformation is, and what all these plays around in the society and how it can be navigated better. And so the basic understanding of all these key terms has to be very well intentionally thought out, but also educated among the different players, be it young, old, and also those who are advanced, so that they can be aware of their biases towards promoting and also advocating for misinformation in different channels. Allow me to speak to this, that one of the theories I have is that the internet is becoming dead each and every day. And there's actually a theory around it called the dead internet theory. If you look at it, you find that according to this theory, majority of internet participants or internet agents are online bots. And right now we see a lot of uh, artificial intelligence bots around social media. And this is not only in social media, but across the internet. And most of these bots are used to pass misinformation and news that are not true, called fake news. And so right now, if you look at the internet, around 47.6% of the internet is made up of online bots, meaning that the human percentage, some of us included, actually all of us here included, we only make about 52% of online users. The other 47% are actually online bots, meaning that if we are not intentional and we are not careful, we are continuing to be fed information that other people are programming us to consume. And this information might be very false and very wrong. And if we are not aware of that, then we are likely to disseminate that information to other people, thus becoming agents of misinformation and disinformation. And so that awareness is key towards understanding our role as citizens and active citizens towards combating misinformation. But also, one of the questions we need to ask ourselves is, are we fighting a losing battle? Because if you look at this interface, with artificial intelligence, things are moving very fast. How can we be able to, as human beings, position ourselves in places where and have a vantage point of combating this misinformation before it reaches to us? And how are we keeping tabs to ensure that the different content creators, but also the owners of these platforms, are accountable towards ensuring that these platforms are free of misinformation, something that they have tried, but they found it very difficult to tackle it. And so, as we look into this role of civic education, it's very important that we think mostly about our critical thinking. How do we analyze information? How does this prevent us from spreading false narratives and encourage disinformation within society? And lastly, most importantly, the role of civic education is also for us to create a community where we can be able to keep each other accountable, but also remind ourselves that behind all this information, there is also human beings and human souls behind it. And so we also need to be careful not to bypass that scenario and start something called online harassment, which is also very key and rampant, something that we can talk about in the later time. Thank you very much, Sakwa.
Thank you very much, Kalia. Wanjiru, I have a question for you and one for Mwamburi. So, for you, Mwamburi, does mis and disinformation only apply to politics, governance, and public leadership, or are there other areas that are affected by this vice? What are some of those areas? What do we begin to see? I know earlier Wanjiru alluded to the faith conversation, and indeed we have seen that happen in that space as well. So you could let us in on what other areas can we look out for misinformation, disinformation. But Wanjiro, we have seen the agents of disinformation shift a lot over the last 2 months, and government has been one of the leading agents and propagators of this vice. How do we come back from this? How do we go back to sanity as a society? As you get to that question, I can read a few comments that I am seeing here. I see someone called Geoffrey, I think Geoffrey Tale. In most cases, more especially in our context, I don't think we have fake news. It's just a term used to water down what we don't feel like letting out. If something is posted about government, the government responds with fake news stamp. Weeks later, the same thing happens. I guess I had said earlier, disinformation affects the citizen agenda in two folds. It can be used by the authorities to discredit the people's agenda. It also travels faster than facts, forcing fact checkers to work harder to convince citizens that you're giving them the right information. James Odiambo says misinformation is getting the facts wrong, whereas disinformation is intentionally misstating the facts. Maserati is saying misinformation is spreading false information unknowingly, whereas disinformation is the deliberate spreading information. Global health champion Hill Ruto, disinformation is deliberate misinformation, or quite a play of words there. Misinformation is deliberate disinformation. Or did I get it wrong? Disinformation is deliberate misinformation. That's what El Ruto says. Over to you, Wanjiro. With government um, changing sides and becoming an agent of disinformation, the society is literally, we have crossed many red lines, not just one. So how do we come back from this?
Oh, it's interesting that you said we have crossed many red lines. I'm seeing it as a positive thing. And you asked me, how do we get back to what? Yeah. Let me start by saying that what we are seeing now especially with the relationship between government and the public, is that the public is finally active. And I know, and I believe I'm speaking to a lot of people from the civil society side. Like, you were praying for times like this, like everything that civil society has done has led us to this moment. And so for me, I don't think we've crossed the red lines. I think the Kenyan public is exactly where it needs to be. We've had, people very, very interested in everything that the government has been doing. Anything that the government speaks, it is fact checked, it is checked again, and people are reading the constitution. People are asking questions about acts of parliament. Like I don't think we need to go back. I don't think we're in a place of insanity. I think we are in a place where we are seeing information for what it is. We are seeing the government for what it is. We are seeing accountability for what it is. I feel like this is the time, that anyone who is doing any form of civic or political education should really go out, because you have the public exactly where you need it to be. So for me, I don't look at it as a red line, unless, of course, you are on the side of the government and you are disappointed that people know too much and people are demanding too much, then we're not going back. But if you're on the side of progress, and if you're on the side of a Kenya that works for Kenya, then I think this is an opportunity that you should really take, to do every aggressive civil education campaign that you've ever thought of. Because it was not possible to do this even last year, because there was this thing about apathy, and something like that. But then also, there's a caution that I'd like to take, and especially with people working, in government, especially at this time. I think sometime, was it yesterday or the day before yesterday, where the government put out communication on mpox, and because of the kind of distrust that the government has with the public, people went onto that post and were refuting what the government was saying. And so that for me is a little bit dangerous, because then it just says that even the little trust that we had, it means it's completely gone. And that therefore means that the government has to work twice as hard just to earn people's trust. And if you're to communicate anything, then communicate with evidence. And, like, you really have to show cause for everything that you're communicating. And I think I wouldn't look at this as a bad thing. I'd really look at it as an interesting shift in the public, and how involved the public wants to be in governance, and in holding the government accountable, and in making sure that what the government says is what the government really, really means. And I think I may be a little bit too optimistic, because I've seen wonderful things, like, for example, when pro-government bloggers were talking about how the country was burning, and there was this campaign showing the promises and the corruption that has literally burnt this country, or have put this country at a very backward place. And people were bringing up projects that were budgeted for, that were launched, and have never really even proceeded. People were bringing up pictures of churches and schools adjacent to these churches. So I don't think we need to be afraid of what is going on. I think everybody just needs to do what it is that they need to do. The civil society needs to be aggressive with civil and political education. Organizations like us, for example, who do a lot of mis and disinformation, we need to go harder on mis and disinformation training. And we also need to, encourage young people to be more involved in government, because we literally prayed for times like this. So let's not be afraid of this moment. Let's not be afraid of a public that knows what is going on, of a public that is fact-checking, of a public that can tell, a propaganda campaign. Let's not be afraid. Let us take this, as an advantage, and move as mad as we have ever moved. So I don't think it's insanity. I don't think we've crossed the red line, unless you're on that other side. But I feel like we really have an opportunity here to work with the public, and to give them every education that we have been preparing for all, for all the everything that we've done has led to this point. So everything that we've done now needs to come out in terms of training and civic and public and and active participation. So I'm not scared. I don't think we should be scared, especially for organizations like like the emerging leaders, who already have kits and tools that we can actually use for the public. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Wanjiro. And I think that should be Ian from ELOG, who has also joined. So, Ian, feel free to just request the mic. Otherwise, I can come to you with any question that comes up. As we head to Mwamburi, your question was What other sectors do we see the problem of disinformation? We have had, I mean, we are now dealing with a new scandal in Eldoret and Lajawas in Gishu of a fake investor who swindled people hundreds of millions of shillings in the faith space that Ranjiru alluded to, in the business space, in just social space communities, our local communities. Is there a penetration of this vice of disinformation? I am going to the chat again. I see Andrea saying Otieno, the mainstream media should be playing a big role in verifying information. And that's an interesting thing. I would want to hear when someone just pick up the mic and speak into verifying and fact checking as a forte. But let's hear you first, Mwamburi. If anyone has a question, wants to make a comment, just request the mic. It will come to you.
Hello.
Um,
Yes.
I'm informed.
Yes, Sakwa.
Of,
Um,
go ahead, Mwamburi.
Okay. Your question was on other sectors that are heavily affected by misinformation and disinformation. First, I think the political and governance sector is one of the most heavily affected, given that misinformation and disinformation is actively used as a propaganda tool during campaigns. But other areas that I would want to point out is, unfortunately, the health sector. And maybe to contextualize it, I'd use an example of the COVID-19 pandemic. During the era of COVID-19, there was a lot of misinformation and disinformation floating around on how it is spread, how it can be prevented, where it started, and different conspiracy theories behind it. So then that was a time where we saw a lot of misinformation and disinformation being spread in the health sector. And we had our government through an executive order and also through active engagement with the public, trying to decipher the different myths that were being laid then. We also have the religion, the faith sector, I'd say. So religion is also heavily affected. And that mention, for example, and that is how cults form. That is how we have violence extremist groups. And that is how we have a lot of conspiracy theories. Lightly speaking, we have, I think most of us have grown up in an era where our parents, are pointing out one or two things about Illuminati and science and so on and so forth. And that was heavily misinformation and disinformation. And maybe I would point out to a campaign that I go back a lot to. It's called the Birds and Chill campaign. A campaign started by a young 23-year-old then in the US, where he was telling people that birds and chill, they are drone spies used by the government of the United States, and people bought it. And the explanation behind his campaign was that he was fighting lunacy with lunacy, that he grew up in a very conservative household in terms of the religious beliefs, and he grew up with a lot of religious misconceptions and conspiracy theories, which as a college student he had to fight back using the Birds and Chill campaign. Another sector, unfortunately, also is the corporate sector, and we see this a lot through different ads and marketing strategies put forth by different companies. So then a lot of propaganda campaigns behind some of the marketing strategies employed by these companies. Yeah, just to mention, but a few. I think those are, top of my head, the ones that I can think of at the moment. Thank you, Sakwa.
Thank you very much, Mwamburi. Quite an interesting. I smiled when Illuminati. It's interesting that we have been dealing with misinformation before we even knew the terms. Ian from Ilog, and I have Telen Zomo from Siasa Place, and I have Stella Ndirutu from ELF Africa. There is an interesting thing going on in, of course, the elections happening in the US, but in the UK over the last 2-3 days, we are witnessing something that has never happened before. A lot of just misinformation, and narratives against immigrants, against black folks, against a specific part of their demographic. And this was started by false information. But what is most interesting that I would like you people to speak to, and I see Miriam Rose also has a mic. What to speak to is how the government of the UK. Let's look at global north and global south. How they treat and advance misinformation, disinformation. When something like what's happening in the UK would be happening elsewhere in Africa or Asia, there would be very specific terms used: barbaric, inhuman, and so on, xenophobic, and so on and so forth. But Prime Minister Keir Starmer called it right wing, I think right wing extremism. Ian, Miriam, Nzomo, what do you make of that? As I see if I have any hands from the audience. I guess I see you have unmuted. You can go ahead. I don't know if I'm the only one who can't hear you.
Sakwa, we have Ian using the elog account.
Keep Robert, can you guys hear Agesa?
No, I can't hear her, but we have Ian in the room. He's using the elog account.
Ian, please proceed using the elog account. You're a speaker, so just unmute and proceed.
Okay, thank you very much, Sakwa. Sorry, I'm joining in this conversation very late in the day. A bit of a commute is a problem. But just to respond to what is happening in the UK right now, and the kind of labeling that it has taken so far. And from where we sit, feel like this is a how do you call it? Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Ian, we can hear you. Please proceed. Unmute yourself. I see you've muted.
Hello. Am I visible?
You're
Audible,
audible,
sorry.
Ian.
Am I audible? Sorry.
Yes.
Oh, crap. Okay. Am I visible? Am I audible?
Yes, Ian, you're audible. Please proceed. We can hear you.
Okay. So what is currently unfolding in the UK is bringing to fore what we've always suspected. It's the matter of mis and disinformation is not limited to the global south, and as much as people would like to think the global north has got a hand on it, from what has happened in the last 6 days, clearly shows that they have yet to tame this particular scourge of mis and disinformation. So what does that imply? It implies we are being pushed to address an issue that is very big, that is without support. We're just on our own trying to make sure that things we are tracking and reporting on this misinformation, trying to debunk them as they happen, so that it doesn't degenerate to what is currently being witnessed in the UK. And as a civil society working in this space, I think largely we've been able to contain it, but there's still more work that needs to be done, so that we then get to that level of degeneracy as a nation or even as a community as a whole. So I think there's still more to be done. More partnerships need to be made around this particular topic of mis and disinformation, and probably look for a proper way of just roping in the public, more so the old people down in the village, because they take this information they get from the internet as what, just as has been displayed in the UK. Nobody cared to confirm even the nationalities of the person who stabbed the kids. he's a person from Wales, but since he's a person of color, it became an issue. So people just took advantage and spread misinformation, which ignited a war between the natives of the UK and the people of color who are immigrants, even if they are citizens. So from where I sit, there's still more to be done by us, by the government, even in terms of policies. Yeah, so that would be my submission, Sako.
Thank you, Ian. I think we lost Sakwa. So, and I can see Wanjiru's mic is on. Kalia, Wanjiru, does anyone want to weigh in on the conversation we're having? I also see Miriam has accepted the microphone. So, Miriam, you can go ahead. Miriam Rose.
Thank you. I sorry, I had dropped off before, but mine was more of a question than answering what is being discussed, and I joined a bit late. But I've written in my question in the chat. But the first thought that came to me when I saw this poster on LinkedIn was the question that I've posed over the last few months. One of the things that has been on my mind and I've spoken about has been lack of information as well. Could be misinformation, disinformation. Just by talking to people on the grassroots, I say I live in the village, so I go to the village and I talk to people about anything that's going on and any hot topic, and every time without fail I get people having the wrong information or the wrong information or lack of information at all. So my question to maybe you guys would be, how is it a problem of human resource, or is it funding, or what can we do? Is there a strategy that we can have to ensure that the very last person gets the right information? Because we can talk about it, but if we don't action, or maybe we don't know why there is a problem, there's that information gap, then we might never be able to change anything. So yeah, that was my question, especially for the grassroots people, for the people who only rely on, let's say, mainstream media to feed them information. And I find that very problematic. Yes, that's my question.
Thank you, Miriam Rose, for your question. How do we make sure that we are getting to the very last person with accurate information? And I am going to throw that over to Ian, Kalia, or Wanjiru, whoever can pick up the microphone and answer that. And while you're answering the question, perhaps invite you to consider how TikTok has penetrated to the ends of the country. Like everyone, not everyone, most of the people we know, even at the grassroots, have TikTok or have access to TikTok accounts. So considering that, and with the question that has been posed by Miriam, how do we make sure that we are reaching everyone at whatever level with the correct information? Kalia, Ian, Wanjiru, you can just unmute and go ahead as I make other people speakers.
All right, I'd like to go first. Like I said, I'm very optimistic about this process, and I say that for a number of reasons. And I love that question. Thank you, Miriam, for that question. I remember when I said that the public is exactly where, you know, we prayed for days like this, and especially members of the civil society, where, you know, you are like the complaint was apathy and young people not being interested in information. Right now you have people reading the Constitution, you know, having spaces over 300 plus people just discussing the Constitution, discussing the state of the country, discussing all these things. There's something very interesting I have seen where, you know, young people are going on buses and they're having civic and political education in buses. You know, the way you know, the way bus preachers used to do it. Now we have young young people, sort of getting into those spaces and, doing that kind of civic and political education. I have also seen a lot of organization within justice centers and justice communities where they will sit together and they will talk about the constitution, talk about the cost of living, and that has been going on. And of course, a lot of it has gone unnoticed for many years because we were not looking at what was going on the ground. Another interesting thing that I have seen, and I think we saw that was during at the beginning of the Reject Finance Bill protest, when we had people breaking down the finance bill in so many languages, and thanks to the movement that was begun by Mike Mushiri. We are also seeing like these conversations are usually carried from the online space and into radio stations, where you have radio stations discussing what was going on online, which is also a way to sort of educate people. We also have the techies who've been using ChatGPT to sort of explain some of these laws, explain some of these bills in a very simplified way, where you can just log in, or where you can just click, on the link and have any bill and even ask any question and even summarize it for you. So as we proceed, even with this, with this protest and with this, I'm choosing to call it a revolution. With this revolution, it's becoming very easy for people to disseminate information, especially because we need it, and because there's a need for people to act and to be on the streets aware, not just protest and be angry over things that are going on, but to actually pay attention and to be aware, and to also have the conversations about, how does governance affect our lives. And so I'd just like to continue to encourage, especially those involved in civic and political education, to keep doing what you're doing, to go harder, because the public is exactly where you want it to be. Everything that you've done in the past years has led you to this point. So my encouragement, and I will say this over and over and over, as civic and political education spaces, do what you're doing, go hard. The ground is ready. Go hard and educate as many people as possible. All those wild ideas that you had when it didn't seem like the public was even interested in governance, the public is now very interested in governance. Do those things. Go on TikTok, go on buses, organize Bunge la Wananchi, which now I'm seeing is now a big deal, where people are just sitting down to discuss, issue-based things. So I think this is actually your opportunity to just go hard as you've probably never done, because the ground is literally ready, and just prepare young people for a round of accountability and civic participation that we've probably never seen before, so that we don't say this thing happened and we didn't do anything about it. Just go hard. I feel like this is an opportunity for you to really go hard, and I hope that I hope we can work together and just making sure that everyone understands what the Constitution says, everyone understands what is going on. Like, it's time.
Thank you, Wanjiru. As we prepare to hear from Ian and from Kalia, I am going to request the members of the audience, if you have any question, if you have any comment, kindly request for the microphone. It will be passed over to you so that you can also share your contributions. Over to you, Ian.
Okay. I'd like just to really support Wanjiru's point. Yes, the ground is very prime right now. The youths that we've been saying that are very passive in relation to issues, political or governance processes, are now into this space. They want to get to know more information. The problem is that they want to get this information now and very fast. So I'd give an example of TikTok. ELOG had at the end of the 2022 general election process, ELOG had flagged TikTok as a problematic social media platform that had a very high propensity for mis and disinformation. And this is one area that no one was looking at, and we were able to isolate that TikTok will be a ticking time bomb, and it has come to pass. But it's not all gloom and doom, because TikTok has, since this particular protest began, has been used for good. So the question is, how do we get to harness the good that TikTok is bringing to the conversation of mis and disinformation? And this now ties down to now communication from our end. We will speak about duty bearers. What is the information that we're getting from the various duty bearers of various governance processes? I think it was Miriam Ross who had raised it as an issue of HR. I don't think if it's an HR issue, but it's a failure of this government institution to really communicate on time and clearly on what they are doing. So most of the time, Kenyans in general are left out there to guess, and anyone will come up with a story and people will fall for it and take it as a truth. So my call to the duty bearer, to the government, basically is just to communicate clearly what are the issues, what is happening in the ministries, what is happening with the processes that you're running as a government, that does not really expose it to mis and disinformation. Secondly, in terms of radio stations, I speak to traditional media basically. So in our reports, we've been able to flag traditional media has performed very well in terms of just trying to thwart or stop mis and disinformation on their platforms. So when I talk about traditional media, I'm talking about television, print media, and these are television stations that have national coverage, so as well as print. On radio, our biggest challenges have been on vernacular radio station, because when people are having those live commentary, political commentary shows, that is
Can we hear Ian, or we have Ian? I can't hear you.
sorry. Okay, sorry. So my point was on traditional media. On traditional media, according to the findings that we've had so far while monitoring the media, traditional media has been very good at identifying and stopping misinformation. And by traditional media, I mean TV, print, and radio. The aspect of radio has been the bit of radio that has been problematic has been the vernacular radio, because this is where we have conversations in those vernacular radio stations that are not really scripted by the radio station. So the most that the radio station can do is just to distance themselves and say that whatever views that are given in this particular show are not for the radio station, but of the listener or the speaker who will be speaking at that particular time. So much has been done by the traditional media, but there's still room for improvement. Editorial policies by TV and print have worked so far. So it's a matter of how do we replicate this now to social media platforms. So conversation with multi social media companies, there isn't much that has come in terms of just saving the space, because they came up with the content moderators, which has not been very effective, even in terms during the period of the elections, because we get a lot of mis and disinformation on all media platforms who are really so that they have content moderators on their platform. So there's a lot to be queried, and maybe if we put our heads together, I think we would come with a solution to save the situation in Kenya as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Wajiro. I am loving the sentiments that are being shared in this space. The affirmation that it's if you have been doing civic education, if you have been doing communication about the political and democratic processes in this country, it is time to go hard because the ground is ready to receive this kind of information. Now, before I come to Kalia, we have Bongekile Filana, who has requested for the mic. Bongekile, over to you.
Thank you so much. I'm Bongegile. I'm from South Africa, but I joined this webinar because I admire the courage that we have as young people of Kenya, and also I want to applaud the organizers of this important webinar. So my question is that how do you deal with bot accounts, especially here on Twitter, on X, that are spreading misinformation? Because the information end up confusing the citizens. Some they create, like in a case that of South Africa, they create accounts that look exactly like the government accounts, and then they spread fake news using those accounts. So how can one also try to put a stop on that? And also, as young people, how do you mobilize campaigners against misinformation and disinformation? I saw that in Liberia, they have campaigners against disinformation and information, and also to educate the civil society at large. How do you go about that? So that's my question as it relates to the information integrity. How do you make sure that you will enhance information integrity? Thank you so much.
Thank you for your question. Perhaps to Kalia, as you give your comments on the previous question, you can also address the question by Bungekile because it sits within your area of expertise. The questions were, how do you deal with bot accounts, especially when these bot accounts are mimicking government sites and spreading false information? And also, how do you stage a campaign to educate young people and civil society organizations against misinformation and disinformation? Over to you, Kalia.
All right, thank you very much, Lodge. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, thank you. So, thank you very much, Miriam, for that very thoughtful question around access to information. And one of the things I want to mention is that the access to information and contribution to disinformation stroke misinformation is a very tricky conundrum. Because as per my analysis, you do find that inadequate information breeds misinformation, for example, and information overload or information access fuels a lot of fatigue, and this depends a lot of disinformation. And so we are looking at two very wide spectrum where we have inadequate information and there is disinformation. And if you look at the other side of it, where there is information overload or fully access information, there is excessive disinformation. A good example is in the current context. If you compare to years before, the inadequacy of information contributed to disinformation, but it was not as rapid as it is right now. And I'm sure that at some point we can be able to, when we get time, take you through how we can be able to solve that problem, because it takes a lot of time to tackle it. But one of the things that I would want to mention to you is the importance of civic awareness, particularly on critical thinking, that will bring us to the middle of both the disinformation and misinformation war. That critical thinking is very important, and that is a skill that we really need to build within ourselves and in our communities and with our parents, and those are the grassroots, are the last mile connection. We need to impart to them the critical thinking skills. And so, as Wanjiru mentioned, it's important to give ourselves hope and continue to reach out to as many people as possible, with the need to be aware of how their biases and their unawareness is contributing to misinformation and disinformation. Coming on to Bongo Kile, your question about bots is very interesting. About how do we compete, for example, between bots and humans in this war around misinformation and disinformation. One, I will say that is a war in which we cannot compete as humans, especially with evolving technology. It's going to be a very difficult war for us to win. One, because bots process information very fast. They can disseminate information rapidly. You can have over 500 bots sending information at a go. They also operate on consistency. They can generate information subsequently without tiring, and humans cannot do that. Also, on the other side, as humans, we excel so much in creativity, so in judgment. So it's very easy for us to have an understanding of what is happening, and also empathy, which is lacking within the bots as of now. But as this technology is advancing with the rapid AI that is coming in, and this continues to take time, and especially the generative AI, which learns our habits and how we talk, how we process information. It's going to be particularly very difficult to distinguish it from humans, and the bots are going to be very adaptable to humans in the future, and in the near future. Probably next few months, and it's going to be very difficult to distinguish between what actually a bot said and what a human actually said, and so that is scary, but also very, very important. That one of the ways in which we can work together to support the awareness and the stopping, like the second part of your question, how can we enhance and support people to fight these bots, will be around platform accountability. For example, platform accountability is all about how do we hold social media platforms and these tech companies and tech giants in monitoring and addressing different bots and their services within their platforms. And that is the first place and the foundation that we can be able to really fight this issue of bots in terms of regulation and monitoring, by demanding for more accountability with platforms and holding these tech companies into accountable to ensure that that does happen, or they make public. For example, one of the things we can do is to ask them to make public data to show us how many bots are active within their platforms, and why they're active, and keeping them accountable. And that helps them now to do the hard work of looking at their system and ensuring their system is foolproof towards against bots, for example. The other thing is also promoting a lot of media literacy, something that we've talked a lot over this conversation. And lastly, I will talk about the improvement in terms of our detection technologies. And so this is an area where all the people interested in technology and upcoming technologies can check on, called digital technologies. There is a big gap when it comes to detection technologies, because detection technologies are those technologies enabling us to detect patterns of a bot, for example, and abnormal interactions within a system to help us curb those unhuman behaviors, for example. And so we need to invest more on those as techies, so that we can be able to support against this war on information and disinformation. And so with that, I hope I've addressed your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Kalia. Seeing as there are no more questions or requests to speak, and we are 2 minutes 2 minutes beyond the time that we had intended to conclude the conversation, I am going to invite all the speakers just for a round of closing remarks. What is the way forward now that we are in this space where we are being bombarded with a lot of information, we're interacting with a lot of information? I would say traditional, in quotes, traditional fact checkers are being overwhelmed with a lot of work, and now everybody has to take up that task of fact-checking information and spreading the correct information. What is the way forward for us? Wanjiru says, it is an exciting time. These are the days we prayed for, and I can attest to that. These are the days we prayed for, when people would be awake and active enough to engage in discourse this robust and to be able to recognize false information when they see it. What does the future look like for us? What is your call to action for the young people in the space and young people as a whole across the continent? If we can have your closing statements or closing remarks in 2 minutes each, then we can wrap up the conversation. I will start with Wanjiru, then over to Ian, and I will conclude with Kalia. Over to you, Wanjiru.
Me, first of all, I'll say Ruto must go. That's my closing remark. He really must go, him and everything that he represents. And then another thing that I would want to say is that I'm really proud, of the public and how, and everything that has happened organically, and we are really each other's harvest, and we are also, we are really who we've been waiting for, and so I'm very proud to be Kenyan. I'm very proud to be an active, an active young person, even on X, on TikTok, everywhere. I'm very proud of the young people and everything that they are doing, and I hope that we can continue to support, everything that is going on, because really, what is really going on is that people just want Kenya to work for Kenya, inside Kenya. And so I'm really in support of everything that is going on. And I also just want to encourage everyone, especially people who are involved in education work. And by education, I'm talking about political and civic education. Just keep doing what you're doing, do it harder. I think this is the time to really go out and go hard. I'll keep saying that, because we really have an opportunity to educate one another. And yes, and I think I will end it there. Thank you so much. And also, when everyone else was talking about their reports, we do have a WhatsApp bot where we launched an information integrity toolkit, and then we put it in our WhatsApp in a WhatsApp bot. It will be shared on the Fumbua page, where you can get access to the WhatsApp bot. And what the WhatsApp bot really is a WhatsApp conversation that teaches you information integrity. What is misinformation? What is disinformation? How do you know what is a fake tweet? How do you know what is a fake media card? We all have it compiled in our WhatsApp bot. So please follow us at Fumbua, and then we will have the link just there ready for you. So you click on it, and then you can begin your course on WhatsApp. And thank you so much to ELF for organizing this. I'm looking forward to more of these conversations, and I'd like you to keep going, and do what you need to do, and go hard. Thank you.
Thank you, Wanjiru. Over to you, Ian. And Mwamburi and Agesa, if you are within the audience, kindly request for the mic so that you can also add your closing remarks. Over to you, Ian.
Okay, from my end, I'd really like to call on organizations that are working around detections on technology that detects mis and disinformation. We've had few locally made technology that maybe in terms of just integration with the work that various CSOs do around mis and disinformation, it would be important to really have them on board to just get to know what the work is and how we can use whatever platform that they have. So we've had a few. We've had Midan Check, we've had Africa Check, Pesa Check, I verified by the MCSK, and now the WhatsApp bot by Fumbua Kenya. So the more people that get on this, it will be very easy and very light work for us to really fight and tackle mis and disinformation on our spaces, specifically on our social media platforms. So my call to everyone is that let us get a final way of crowdsourcing this work. Let the people be giving us information or giving information to this particular platform so that it is just verified before they share it or before they consume it. So that would be my parting shot. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. That was amazing. Over to you, Kalia.
All right, thank you very much, Lodge. Mine is very simple. Stop when you receive information, check, confirm it's true, and verify if it's true as well. Thank you very much, and do have a blessed evening.
Thank you, Kalia. Thank you all. I want to, I cannot see Mwamburi or Agesa on the, I cannot see them on the panel, so I will proceed to conclude the conversation. Thank you to Fumbua KE for sharing your reports with us and also taking time to participate in this conversation. Thanks to ELOG for sharing their reports as well, and for contributing, both Paulina Gesser and Ian Smith, for this conversation today. Thank you to the ELF team, that is Kalia, Robert, and Sakwa, who was our moderator before he dropped off the space due to network challenges to the ELF team present in the room for your support, to our audience for making time to be with us and have this critical conversation on public information disorder that we are currently experiencing as a country. We will be coming back to you on the 9th of this month with another conversation touching on key areas or touching on the theme of the Youth Week, from clicks to progress. We will also be coming back to you on the 12th to talk about civic education in this digitally connected world. Stay tuned on our social media platforms. You can also follow Fumbua KE to get a nice experience with their WhatsApp chatbot and to learn about how to identify misinformation, disinformation, fake digital cards when you interact with them. ELOG has released several reports that are available on their website and on their social media platforms. You can also interact with our information toolkit for Verify KE. That is on our website and also on our social media channels. Follow ELF Africa, follow ELOG Kenya, follow Fumbua KE, and have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Thank you for being with us today, and enjoy your night.